All right, and good morning, and welcome to day 10 and lesson 10 of the workbook lessons in a course in miracles. Good morning, and thank you for being with me. Again, my name is Oliver Blue, and these workbook lessons videos are being sponsored by Truly Foundation, a nonprofit organization that is um, about sharing advanced teachings to help humanity to come into an awareness of their true identity, because it is knowing of yourself that brings an experience of joy and happiness. And so this morning we are going to look at workbook lesson 10, and just want to remind everyone that these lessons are found in the book, A Course in Miracles. So these lessons are specifically designed together in a course form. We are actually taking a course. When you go to school and you take a course, there's curriculum, there's exercises, there are tests, and there's a learning to take place. And so this is a course in miracle. The miracle is the shift that takes place in the way that we see. Okay. The miracle is when there's a shift in our perception. When there's a shift in our perception, then that means that we see things differently. And that is the whole purpose for the course, for us to gain a new way of seeing that is based on reality and not based on um, the way we have trained our minds to see and to think. And it is a beautiful thing when the mind is in alignment with our true identity. Therein lies the peace, therein lies real happiness, because in that happiness there is an identification or a recognition of our true identification, and it is all good. So, workbook lesson 10, the idea for the day reads: My thoughts do not mean anything. My thoughts do not mean anything. Let's just sit with that for a few seconds and observe your thoughts about this idea that has that may be streaming through your mind. What do you mean, Oliver? My thoughts do not mean anything. All right, let's get into this. This idea, my thoughts do not mean anything, applies to all the thoughts of which you are aware or become aware of in the practice periods. This idea applies to all thoughts. No thoughts are excluded. Again, this is the basis for mind reversal. The basic principle is that the idea applies to everything. The reason that the reason the idea is applicable to all of my thoughts is that they are not your real thoughts. So the thoughts that are streaming through my awareness are not my real thoughts. We have made this distinction before and will do so again, that the thoughts that stream through my awareness, they're not my thoughts. They're just thoughts. And according to previous lessons, they are thoughts about the past. Why? Because my mind is preoccupied with the past. And so if I'm thinking past thoughts, and I'm not in the present. And so I'm not seeing for what it is now. I'm just seeing my memory. And therefore my mind is blank. We've gone through all of those ideas in the past, and they're beginning to make sense. And you'll see that as you go through each lesson, these lessons are so consistent that all the ideas are being revisited over and over and over again. The one consistent thing about the workbook lesson, the one consistent thing about A Course in Miracles is that all the ideas are consistently repeated over and over again in every sentence, in every lesson, in every practice. This repetition is part of the way that we transfer the ideas into our new way of being, our new way of thinking. It is through repetition. So it is purposely, this course is purposely written this way, laid out this way. It is a great, most effective way of learning is to continue to introduce the idea over and over and over again. Because that's the way we trained our minds to think the way they do now. And this in our eyes, in our vision to see the way we see now. Because we've been introduced with ideas of separation over and over and over again since we were an infant, since we were a child. Over and over again, the world has indoctrinated us with a way of thinking. The systems of this world, when I say the world, the systems of this world has indoctrinated us with a way of thinking based on separation by introducing that idea of separation over and over and over again since we were an infant. And that's how we develop this way of thinking that is not real thinking, or seeing that is not real seeing. So this thought reversal is using the same process to undo the way we think now, and so that we can be introduced to what true perception. It says we have made this distinction before, and we do, and will do it again. You have no basis for comparison as yet. When you do, you will have no doubt that what you once believed were your thoughts did not mean anything. This is the second time that we have used this kind of idea. The form is only slightly different. Remember, we used the idea that these thoughts in a prior lesson. The idea was these thoughts doesn't mean anything, meaning the thoughts streaming through our mind. This particular lesson is saying my thoughts doesn't mean anything. Just in case you thought that these thoughts were your thoughts, but in reality, they're not your thoughts. They're just thoughts that are streaming in the ether, and we notice them with our awareness, and we decide to attach ourselves to certain thoughts and ideas and call it mine. But in reality, it's not your thought. It says that this time the idea is introduced with my thoughts instead of these thoughts, and no link is made overtly with the things around you. The emphasis is now on the lack of reality of what you think you think. So today's thought is just reintroducing the idea that what we think or what we think about what we think lacks reality. Why? Because we're only rehearsing thoughts of the past. Are you getting it? You see the connection here? This aspect of the correction process began with the idea that the thoughts of which you are aware are meaningless. They don't mean anything. This is part of the thought reversal process that we are engaging in these courses. And we have to embrace the idea that thoughts doesn't mean anything, as well as things don't mean anything. Why? Because we're not looking at them in the present moment. We're only rehearsing our memories. We only are rehearsing our past relationship with thoughts and things. And if that is the case, we're not in the present moment seeing what's really there. We're just seeing what's in the past. And past is not real time. Past is an illusion. Why is it an illusion? It doesn't exist anymore. The only thing that exists is the present moment. Our concerns about the future doesn't exist. Why? Because it's not in the present moment. So it doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. We'll get used to that idea that it's meaningless. Again, this aspect of the correction process began with the idea that the thoughts of which you are aware are meaningless, outside rather than inside, and then stress their past rather than their present status. Now we are emphasizing that the presence of these thoughts means that you are not thinking. So the presence of these thoughts, or my thoughts, means that I'm not really thinking. What we call thinking, which is rehearsing the past or the anticipation of the future, according to this lesson, that is not real thinking. That is only a rehearsal of what is not real, what is not present, and it has no meaning. Wow. Let's just sit on that because I think that is it in a nutshell. How does that hit you? What do you think about that? And what do you think about what you think about that? And what you think about what you think about that? Well, you're not really thinking about that if you're only rehearsing past ideas about thinking or giving meaning to thoughts in the past or anticipation in the future. According to the lesson, that is not real thinking. Thinking only takes place in the present moment. Now we are emphasizing that the presence of these thoughts mean that you are not thinking. This is merely another way of repeating our earlier statement that your mind is really a blank. That our mind is really a blank when we are only rehearsing the preoccupation with past thoughts. When we're only seeing things based on our past associations with them. Our mind in that moment is blank. We're not thinking. What do you think about that idea? This is merely another way of repeating our earlier statement that your mind is really a blank. To recognize this is to recognize nothingness when you think you see it. Because if your mind is a blank, then there's nothing. As such, it is the prerequisite for vision. To recognize that we're not thinking, that our mind is really a blank when we're rehearsing the past. To recognize that is a prerequisite for us to move to the next step, which is true vision, a true perception. Okay, so there has to be a recognition in this process of our mind training. There has to be a recognition that my thinking and my seeing is meaningless and nothingness. Wow. Okay, like we said, some of the ideas may be startling, some of the ideas may be unbelievable, some of the ideas you may even resist. But just do the exercise. It is the doing of them that will prove they are real. Okay? Close your eyes for these exercises for today and introduce them by repeating the idea for today quite slowly to yourself. The idea, my thoughts do not mean anything. Then add, this idea will help to release me from all that I now believe. This idea, which idea? My thoughts do not mean anything, will help me to release me from all that I now believe. Because what we now believe is that we have been thinking and that we have been seeing. But we have shown through these first 10 exercises that we have been seeing nothing, thinking nothing, and our thoughts and our seeing were meaningless because all we've been really doing is rehearsing our past and being preoccupied by all the past memories or anticipating the future. And neither one of those aspects is real time. The only real time there is now, this present moment. This is a good place to introduce this biblical scripture for those of us who have a biblical foundation background. And it is in this particular scripture is in Psalm 16:11. Psalm 16:11. And in the King James Version, it says, Thou wilt show me the path of life. Thou wilt show me the path of life. Okay. What is the path of life? You can ask yourself that question. And it says, in thy presence, or in the present, is fullness of joy. So this scriptural reference is sharing the idea that joy only happens in the present moment. In thy presence, there's fullness of joy. Not in the past, not in the future, only in the present. So when we are not present, when we're not thinking present, seeing present for what is in front of us or what we're thinking, then it says there's not fullness of joy, there's no joy. Why? Because we're preoccupied with illusions, the past and the future. But in thy presence, there's fullness of joy. It says, at thy right hand, there is pleasures forevermore. And that right hand reference is referring to our knowing ourself, or knowing our true identity. So in the present moment, there's fullness of joy. And in that fullness, that is a knowing of the true self. That the true self is one with everything. Wow. These exercises consist, as before, in searching your mind for all the thoughts that are available to you without selection or judgment. So as you do the exercises today, you want to close your eyes, repeat the idea, my thoughts don't mean anything. Add to that idea, this idea that my thoughts don't mean anything will help to release me from all that I now believe. Try to avoid classifying the classification of any kind. In fact, if you find it helpful to do so, you might imagine that you are watching an oddly assorted procession going by, which has little, if any, personal meaning to you. As each one thought crosses your mind, say, my thought about whatever you're thinking about does not mean anything. So as you close your eyes and you become aware of a thought that is passing through your awareness, because that's really what's happening. It's, it's not really your thought, it's just thought. And they like a procession. It's just like if you were standing on the side of the road and watching a parade go by. You would just look at each presentation in the parade, and it just comes by your awareness. And then once it passes through your awareness, you're ready for the next presentation in the parade. Well, none of those are yours. They're just passing through, and you're just observing them. So as you do this exercise today, use that same idea that as thoughts pass through your awareness like a procession, just recognize them and say, my thoughts about this does not mean anything. And it relieves me from all that I now believe, or all that I now know or think I know about a particular thought or a particular thing. Are y'all getting this? I am. As each thought crosses your mind, say, my thought about this doesn't mean anything. Today's thought, or today's lesson, or today's idea can obviously serve for any thought that distresses you at any time. So as you go through your day today and you have an experience of a distressing thought, okay, you can use the exercise on that thought, but by letting it pass on through your consciousness and say, my thought about this doesn't mean anything. In addition, 5 practice periods are recommended for today. Okay, so each involving no more than a minute or so of mind searching. So today you're going to take 5 minutes, at 5 different intervals, 1 minute intervals. You're going to practice this idea by closing your mind, noticing the thoughts, and saying this thought doesn't mean anything. Or my thought about this doesn't mean anything. Okay? My thoughts about this thought does not mean anything. And then you go on to the next thought. And you do that for a minute or so. Okay? It is not recommended that this time period be extended, and it should be reduced to half a minute or less if you experience discomfort. So if you experience any discomfort about doing this exercise, just shorten the period. Because again, remember, it is all about doing the practice that has meaning to you and that will show you that it's true. Remember, however, to repeat the idea slowly before applying it specifically, and also to add, this idea will help to relieve or to release me from all that I now believe. I love this exercise, and it's critical to our thought reversal. It is critical to helping us to be aware, number one, of the way we think now, and number two, to be aware and come to the conclusion that we have not really been thinking. And this is great because it's a prerequisite to right thinking, true perception, Christ consciousness. Or in, like we say, having the mind of Christ, or thinking and seeing and knowing the way that God does. Whatever language you use, it's all about the correction, the miracle of true perception. Thank you so much for joining us for lesson 10, and I look forward to being with you for future lessons. Have a great day. Bye-bye.